kill outdoors, rise, kill, and eat.
What's going on, guys? Welcome to the 5th episode of Rise and Kill Outdoors. I am glad you're here. Guys, I want to introduce y'all today a guy that I met a few months back at a conference called the Business Makers Network, and he approached me and liked the logo on the back of my shirt, which is why you should go buy one because he's a pretty classic guy and he likes my logo. And at riseandkill.com, not a shameless plug. And he started telling me about a product he makes that's a vest. And this vest it conceals things that, well, us Americans love, and we just celebrated 250 years of our freedom to carry guns. And this vest is made for the workplace. It can be used in hunting and everything else. Man, he's a made in America kind of guy. He's an interesting guy with an interesting name, Garfield. And so far been a wonderful man to meet. So, guys, I want to introduce everybody to Garfield Green. Garfield, my brother in Christ. How are you doing, sir?
Man, I'm doing fantastic. Just busy and sweating a lot in this Texas heat right now.
You and me both. You're down towards San Antonio, right?
In San Antonio, yeah. And we do, I run a construction company, and so we're on a couple of sites right now where we don't have a lot of shade. So we're moving tents around and trying to keep cool. It's not working, but trying.
Gotcha. If you see my screen bump every once in a while, I want to apologize, guys. I've got a Jack Russell that keeps running in and out of the room, and well, I don't know. She's hard to control. She wants to be outside. She hasn't been outside enough today. Not to potty, just to run and play. But anyway, so guys, like I said, I met Garfield. What was it, back in April? Was that when the conference was, I guess?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, and you came up and introduced yourself to me, man. I was impressed with you. I thought you had a cool story. I thought you had a cool product. So why don't you tell us about yourself? Tell us about your product and anything else we'd like to know.
Yeah, no, I've been in the trades for 20 years. I went to my undergraduate degree was pre-med, and I worked for the Air Force in their cardiology department because I thought I was going to go to med school. Realized I didn't like the medical field, but I loved theology. So I ended up going to seminary, was a pastor for a number of years, a youth pastor as well. And but then my wife and I wanted to plant a church, help plant a church, and we wanted to engage in some ministry that wasn't paid. It wasn't going to help me provide for my family. So I said, and I gotta find a way to provide for my family. And so anyway, as Providence had it, we ended up starting a landscape company, which quickly evolved into a landscape construction company. So we mostly did construction. And so for the last 22 years, I've run a landscape construction company. And it's been great. I've been able to keep guys on for, decades at a time. It's been an amazing ministry opportunity running a landscape company and a construction company more than I anticipated. When I left full-time vocational ministry, I thought, well, I'm not going to have nearly as many opportunities to minister to guys. And the reality was I had way more opportunities to minister to guys. We'd be on, especially on commercial sites where you've got multiple crews there. You have all kinds of guys that are like, in the trades, it can be, you're around contractors. It's a much rougher crowd than your Sunday morning church crowd.
Yep.
But I found that I really loved those guys. And I'd have a lot of guys, coming to me from other crews, like, hey, your guy told me I should come talk to you. I've got problems with drugs, or, I'm cheating on my wife, or my wife's cheating on me. And guys were just broken. As people are. And, but they felt that they could come and just talk to me there on a job site. Well, they never would have darkened my door if I was, in my pastoral door. I would have never seen them. But here, I had amazing opportunities to make connections. And the result was we were able to build real cohesive teams and guys that would stick around for decades at a time on my crews, which is fairly unusual in the trades. Guys, especially in the landscape side, and even to a certain degree on the construction side, guys come and go. It's not like it's not usually a career track for a lot of people, but I was trying to find guys that wanted to build beautiful things and wanted to do it with a high level of integrity, and make it a distinctly Christian company. So the motto of that company was God creates, we shape, and so we tried to apply that
Like
whenever
it.
we were doing stuff. But having been in for 20 years, I mean, it's you can do fairly well in running a construction company, but it is hard work. And I'm 54, so I'm getting a little older. But there were certain things I wanted to branch out into. One of them was e-commerce. But I wanted to start making and designing clothing that I wanted to wear, but that I had trouble finding. And so we kind of started poking around and seeing how that might work out. I'm like, I'm going to design something that I wanted a really sharp looking tool vest that I could wear on a job site, but that I could interact with customers. But I also wanted it to be able to have concealed carry pockets in a way that I could truly conceal. So I didn't want to look tactical at all. I wanted my customers to feel comfortable because they had no idea whether I was carrying or not. Some people don't mind at all. Some people feel comforted by that. Some people feel a lot of discomfort with that, but it wasn't any of their business. They didn't need to know. But also some of the environments we would work in, and especially if I had a large cash carry on any particular job, I just always felt better if I could make sure that I had some sort of protection with me. So I'm like, I'm going to design this vest. And so we started out on that. And as I was interacting with people, one of the first things that I came up against was people were telling me, hey, you're going to have to have that made overseas because it's going to be cost prohibitive and maybe even impossible to make here in America unless you start sewing it yourself. And so what I realized was that only 3% of all clothing worn in America is actually made here, which is a shockingly small amount. But then as we kept researching it, it wasn't just that only 3% of our clothing is made here, but the vast majority of garment makers worldwide were earning poverty level wages. There's an organization called the Clean Clothes Initiative, and they kind of research all of this stuff. And so I started digging into that, and I said, man, I can't feel good about having clothing made if I can't also guarantee that the people that are making it are making it. If we're paying them fair, same way I treated my guys on the construction side, I wanted them to be compensated fairly. I wanted them to be able to afford our clothing. I wanted them to love what they were doing and not be doing it. And there's some great clothing makers around the world. And I don't want to say that there aren't, because there's some great guys doing excellent stuff in other parts in the world. So it wasn't that other people can't make clothing, but I really wanted to set out to make a business to where we could start reviving American manufacturing with quality clothing, because there's some excellent tailors, sewers, and garment makers here in the U.S. And I wanted to give those guys a chance to make a good living and make something they could be proud of, and that I could be proud of, and knowing that we were, pushing forward something that could make the communities and the country generally stronger. So that was kind of the inception of where we're going and why we decided to make it in America instead of sending it overseas. And it's honestly, it's not easy. We're sourced our canvas here out of New England. We're making everything local. It is a little more expensive, but I feel good about being able to pay people living wage to make our stuff. And I felt like we were able to just hit the quality out of the park with this first product. And so this is the beginning of our journey in this evergreen gear. The logo is a gear, for kind of the construction and stuff that we engage in. And then the tree was kind of the organic part of the landscaping. So I was kind of combining the two aspects of my existing business into this clothing business. And so here we are, we're running as hard as we can to get this up and running.
You mentioned quality, and okay, hang on. You sent me a vest, guys, and for those that are watching on video and not listening to audio, well, watch video. Or excuse me, for those listening on audio and not watching video, watch video. So I'm going to get this in the camera the best I can. And the first thing I noticed, man, is this thing has absolute quality. I can tell there was a lot of design, a lot of time and thought going into the design and the quality. It's a work vest. There's no doubt about it. It's heavy duty all the way down to the leather patch there. And for guys, I'm going to try to get that logo in there. As you can see, the gear in the tree as he was talking about. But, what I noticed is, first of all, you're right. It looks like something you would wear every day. Yeah, I think you're wearing one right now, right?
Yeah, I am.
Yeah.
And I wanted one I could pop the collar up, because I didn't find enough vests with a full collar on them. And when it was wanted the sun off my neck, or I wanted to keep warm, either way.
Well, and see, I wanted to wear this one, but you don't make one, or you didn't have one in stock. I think you do make one, but you don't make one in size Nephilim, unfortunately. So, or didn't have one in stock when you sent this to me. So, but
And you're not the last guy that asked for that. I've had a couple other guys be like, "Bro, where's my 4X?" I'm like, "Man, I'm working on it."
but here was the awesome part. This guy believes in his business, first of all. And we're going to talk about hunting. We're going to get, this guy's got some cool hunting stories, and we're fixing to get to those here in a second. But I want to talk about this vest just a hair more here, because the first thing when I grabbed it is, this thing's not a lightweight piece of material. This thing's not just, and the quality, the stitching, the buttons, the storage in the pockets. Let me see if I can get this thing unbuttoned here. But I mean, so we can, oh, it's not buttoned, it's zipped. So, and okay, the zipper, first of all, is I think you could zip a whole moose up in this thing and it not break. But there's your concealed carry pockets on both sides, I believe.
Yeah.
Extra magazine storage, if I can get this right for the camera guys. Sorry. There's your magazine storage. There's your second holster over here, magazine storage there. So in other words, you're going out and you've got your conceal, your compact conceal. You probably have the range of, on average, 48 chances to protect yourself, in case, or protect those or your loved ones around you in case of emergency, with all that storage in there. Think about that. That's 48 chances within your work vest or your hunting vest, whatever you want. I know you told me they come in that khaki that you're wearing, or tan, and they come in a tobacco color, which is the one I told you. Yeah. And
I'll make sure to get on your way when we get that 4X finished out.
But and you said you're working on some women's vests, and I'm sure they're going to be the same high quality, working on some lighter materials. Guys, first of all, before we move on, tell them your website, how they go buy one of these, and real quick, if you don't mind.
You bet. It's evergreen-gear.com. And you can use a promo code ToolVest and then the little money symbol, and that'll get you a discount on those. So we're selling them right now at $279. But honestly, if you're buying a good cowboy hat for $300, this is our margins are not as high even as a good Stetson. So with the just the cost of the materials and labor and everything, but we would love for you to come pick one up. So this is in fact, I've got mine. If you can see, I'll show you. This is I got my sidearm in here. It's it's super comfortable. So yeah, and it's fully ambidextrous. We've got a lot of lefties in my family, so I made sure that they could go either way.
Yeah, it just okay. So that's a 2X, and okay. So I'm 6'6" and 340 pounds. So there's not a 2X in this. It's going to fit me, but
right.
But I was able to get it on. It was, of course, short, and I couldn't zip it up or anything.
Mm-hmm.
But what I did notice is when I put it on, it's a heavy material. But when I put it on, even being too small for me, a little bit tight, I noticed that if this fit me, this would rest on my shoulders very well. It would fit. It drapes down. It's not going to be baggy. It's not going to be out in the way. I could see where if you're hunting, if you're outdoors, working, hunting, whatever you're doing, that's a physical activity. This vest is going to be dependable. So good job. I can tell you did your research. I can tell you're backing up your product backs up your words, man. And that's honorable. And a lot of men don't do that. They just want to make a quick buck and get out the door, and that's it. Garfield's not doing that, guys.
No, I appreciate that. Yeah, we were. I was just telling you earlier. We was talking to a guy in Oklahoma. He's a cowboy. He runs a big ranch near Ada, Oklahoma. And some of his friends who were coon hunters, they were like, "Oh, this is going to be amazing for coon hunting because we've got we need a flashlight, we need a GPS tracker for our dogs." And I was like, hey man, if I'd have thought about coon hunting, I'd have promoted that on the front end. But that's awesome. It really is for something for guys being outside that need some need some storage and tactical areas.
Yeah. So let's talk about hunting. Let's talk about the outdoors. I know we've talked personally a little bit, and I told you not to tell me too much because I wanted to learn on the podcast. I like learning about people with everybody else because I get to ask the questions in the peak of curiosity that you may not ask later on. What you know, you forget, right?
Mhm.
So, Garfield, tell us about your outdoors world. You said you grew up in Oklahoma. What part? What part of Oklahoma are you from? I remember you told me, but I forgot.
Yeah, it's a little town called Wynnewood, and it's Pauls Valley area. It's about a half
Mhm.
hour south of Oklahoma City. It's really just kind of, I mean, there's some horse ranches out there. My dad and his brother were rodeo guys. My grandfather, also Garfield, he ran a broom corn factory for most of his life. Twisting broom corn for his whole life made him look like Popeye. So he had these
Yeah.
beastly huge forearms that were disproportionate to the rest of his body. He was about 6'2", but his forearms were just insane. So for just years and years of twisting that broom corn by hand. So, but my dad was an avid fly fisherman. He loved to fly fish, and so that was kind of my first exposure. We would do other kinds of fishing, but man, if there was any open area where we could put a fly in a stream or a lake or a pond. He did it, and so because he loved it so much, it just made me love it so much. And even today, it's one of my favorite, most relaxing getaways is to just get out there and do some fly fishing. And I got so used to making those relaxing motions, with your arm, that constant cast on the fly, that sometimes I have trouble sitting still if I'm doing if we're in a lake or I've got something sitting on a bobber. It's hard for me to sit still now. I'm just so used to that motion, but that, and he was an avid dove hunter. Once a year, usually, right after Labor Day, we would go dove hunting. We used to go down to Mexico, in that area a lot when it was still safe to do it when I was much younger, but it got to be kind of dangerous near the border. So we usually go here in South Texas, and there's a ton of places here in South Texas to do dove hunting. But those were our two outdoor hunting activities that I love to share with my dad. He's gotten a little bit, kind of breaks my heart. He's gotten to that point here in the last couple of years. He's 78. No, he's 79, and he just can't get out there anymore. And I can't get out there without being sad for right now. I'm sure it'll pass, but that was just the thing that we did together for years.
Nice. Yeah. So I grew up a little bit in Yuba, Oklahoma, which is just north of the border. So, um, for perspective, north side of the Red River, in between Bonham and Durant. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. And small town, I'm sure, like Wynnewood, right?
Mhm, yeah, I think there was like one stoplight for years. I think there may have been two, but it was very small.
You were doing better than us. We had a stop sign that no one paid attention to. So,
Yeah,
but
I don't know that people paid attention to the stoplights, but they were there.
but yeah, I remember growing up there. That was my first dose of outdoors now. And I remember as a kid going out and with either a pellet gun or a little 22 or whatever, and spending the night in the woods by myself and
Mhm.
just loving it. And
Totally.
starting a fire. And my dad built me this huge tree house out there, and it was really, really impressive. And somehow I had a goat that figured out how to climb it. I'd wake up and I'd spend the night in my treehouse. I'd wake up and the stinking goat would be eating my shirt. But but uh, I remember walking, to our ponds and fishing in the wild apricot trees. And Oklahoma's country that a lot of people don't talk about. First of all, it seems like
Mhm.
sometimes, they talk about Arkansas, they talk about Louisiana, they talk about the northern side. As I've had, my past few guests, they're doing moose hunting and things like that. And then here's Oklahoma, almost dead middle, just north of Texas here. And I don't think a lot of people realize how beautiful the countryside is, how rugged it can get up in the Arbuckles and areas like that.
Oh,
Um,
love the Arbuckles,
and
Turner Falls area. If you've been out to Turner Falls,
yes,
beautiful waterfalls and streams. Oh man, it's gorgeous.
and they don't realize how good the deer are out there.
Mhm.
Um, you know, I used to go with an owner of a company that I used to work for. Almost, it was Texas side, but we were 10 minutes from Oklahoma, in between here and Amarillo, and that we'd go dove hunting there, and Now, I've never dove hunted Oklahoma, but I would imagine it would be kind of similar to what we were there. But the dove are great, uh, from my experience, uh, and yeah, it's just Oklahoma has a lot to offer when it comes to fish and game. It just
Mhm.
does. One thing it has the advantage, of course, Texas down here. If you want to go south, you can hit saltwater. We have, but then you've got Texoma that splits Texas and Oklahoma. Uh, but then you go up north and you got something you don't have as much in Texas up in I know up in the northeast side of Oklahoma, and you can straighten me out real quick, but the fly fishing side of things, which is something I've never gotten to do. I've always been your standard spin cast, bait caster, things like that. And I'm a crappie fisherman just because that's what my grandfather fished for, and that's what I
Oh
got a
yeah.
taste for. And they do stock around here locally in the ponds and stuff. Maybe you've seen it. I'm sure they do it down south a little bit in the colder months. I don't know how far south they do it. Maybe not as far south as you, but they stock the rainbow trout in local ponds and stuff up
They
here.
they
Do they?
do. They release tens of thousands into the Guadalupe River down here,
Okay,
as soon as it starts getting cold, and it's awesome because there's some amazing places. There's a couple of fly fishing outfitters, just north of San Antonio in the Canyon Lake area, up along the Guadalupe, and there's a ton of fly fishing outfitters. It's phenomenal. The river's real wide, great for fly fishing, and with all those rainbow trout in there, it's awesome. They get down as far as Bernie, which is real close to San Antonio,
okay,
but
but they don't
they last
spawn,
for a
right?
few months.
But like here, they can't spawn, right? Same thing.
Right.
Out,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, the river doesn't change nothing for them or anything.
No, no,
So
they'll die out when as soon as the heat hits.
yeah,
But it's fun.
um,
It's
I know like everything I caught's been 6 to 8 inches,
mhm,
small handheld, handheld size of a cell phone kind of stuff. But I think they try to in every pond try to put a good trout.
mhm.
Um, in them. What have you seen any big trout come out of this when they stock these ponds and lakes and rivers?
Yeah, they're not bad. I mean, I don't know how it is up there in San Antonio, in the Guadalupe, Canyon Lake area. I mean, they're fun size. I mean, they're not beastly big, but they're pretty fun. I mean, it's not like catching, salmon or largemouth bass or something like that. So,
Mhm.
and I love fishing for salmon. I'll tell you a story. If you wanted a story about, so my whole family, we love the outdoors. They're kind of adventurous, and my dad gave me a taste for camping and just being outside. So my aunt and uncle, and this was it's been about 35 years ago. They hopped on the back of his motorcycle and drove from Oklahoma to Alaska because they heard you could homestead in Alaska, and then they just, the state would deed you over the land. So they did. They hopped on the back of his motorcycle, just like absolute lunatics. They drove, I mean, all the way from Oklahoma up there through the, Alaska Canadian Highway, camping out half the time, with a tent. They found this beautiful place up outside of Anchorage in the Matanuska-Susitna Valley. It's near Wasilla, where they start the Iditarod.
Okay.
Cut this beautiful piece of land, built a cabin, lived there long enough to be deeded over to the state, and then they just fell in love with Alaska. And so my aunt was like, "You've got to come to Alaska." And I was 20 years old. I was like, you know what? I'm gonna take a semester, maybe a year off of college. I was at Arizona State. I said, I'm just gonna come to Alaska. And she's like, so, and my aunt's, so this is in the early 90s. And my aunt's like, you can go anywhere hitchhiking because everybody's gonna pick you up. And she's like, in fact, I'll make you your first hitchhiking sign. And so I'm like, okay, this sounds awesome. You're 20, your frontal lobes aren't fully connected. And you're like, what could go wrong? This is gonna be amazing. But sure enough, so like I fly up there. Um, Although I would tell you, before I'd been to Alaska once before, so she had me come up, and it was the beginning of March, the end of February, and I was coming out of Phoenix, and she said it's cold, so make sure you've got boots. And so I get off the plane from Phoenix, which was like 90 degrees when I left Phoenix, and she looked at my cowboy boots and she says, "You're an idiot." I got my boots. She said, "Not that kind of boots," because I think it was like negative 15 there at the time. So she outfitted me pretty well, but for that next time I went, I got there in May, still a lot of snow on the ground. I mean, in some places, 10, 15 feet off the side of the road. But
Right.
sure enough, she made me this sign. I was like, where should I go first? Because I needed a little money. She's like, go to the coastal areas, some of the fishing towns, walk out onto the docks, tell them you need to work, and said within the day you'll have a job on a boat or cleaning seafood or cleaning fish or hauling up the halibut or something. You'll have a job. And I was like, okay, great. When you're 20 and you're excited about it, you just like you're not. And there's no cell phones, nothing back then, right? So
Right.
so she makes me this sign that says, I think the first place I went was Seward. She makes me the sign that says Seward on it. This was, one of the coastal towns, if you're familiar with Alaska. So she's like, I'll drive you out onto Alaska Highway 1, drop you off. Just hold out the sign, stick out your thumb. Somebody's going to pick you up. So I'm like, great. We get out there. She drops me off on the highway. She turns around and heads back to Wasilla where they were living. And I'm there for maybe 5-10 minutes. And somebody pulls over in their truck and they're like, where are you headed? I'm like, well, Seward. Like, hop in. In probably 4 months of hitchhiking, I think the longest I ever waited was like maybe 15 minutes for a ride.
Oh,
And
wow.
all kinds of folks would pick me up, old ladies, younger women, lots of guys. And most people say the same thing. Like, I don't usually pick up hitchhikers, but you look pretty harmless. It's like, hey, I'll take it. So I'd hop in, and guys would pick me up and they're like, hey man, we'll drive you like 500 miles if you will help us frame our cabin. So we just need some extra hands. And I'd say, yeah, man, that sounds awesome. So they'd feed you for a couple of days. You're, just helping them hold some timbers up, the framing cabins, different types of stuff. And anyway, it gets you kind of where you wanted to go. So went out to Seward, and then I stayed in Seward a little bit, but loved Valdez. So headed out toward Valdez, just hitchhiking. Great mountains there. There's beautiful mountains. Looks like the kind of like a mini Swiss Alps out there. And the salmon fishing was unbelievable. In fact, at that time of year, you could. So I got a job on the dock working on a boat briefly, and then in one of the seafood warehouses. But you could go out into the streams, and the salmon were spawning. And if you were quick enough, you could just grab those guys right out of the stream. We would fillet them. We'd make little campfires. Grab some wild onions. We'd buy some lemons at the grocery store, and you just cook them right there on your campfires. Holly, man, we ate just amazingly well for months on end. I was with a buddy of mine, and then I met some other folks there. We traveled around a little bit, but ended up hitchhiking all the way up to Denali National Park. And I was like, I really wanted to go to the outback of Denali, and it is wild there. So this was in the 90s, you go to the ranger station and you say, hey, I really want to go to the outback of Denali, because they've got buses. They give you, so they say, okay, you got to go through the bear awareness of training. We got to make sure you can read a topographical map, and we're going to put you on a bus and we're going to drive you for hours and drop you off. And then it's your responsibility if you get a 5-day pass or 6 or 4, however long. And they're like, we're going to pick you up, be back at this spot. Make sure you can obviously read a topographical map so you know where you're going. And so
Yeah.
you go through this bear awareness training because the grizzlies. And I remember when I was in there, one of the guys had said to the ranger, because the ranger said, look, if you're attacked by a black bear, it's unlikely that you can fight them off. But if you're attacked by a grizzly, there's certain things to do. You don't want to be attacked by a grizzly. But if you are, you can play dead, or you can, cover your neck with your, big hiking pack. And so I remember one of the guys asking, I think he had like a 380 or something. And he's like, well, could I shoot the grizzly? And the ranger's like,
with the 380.
Yeah. The guy was like, the ranger's like, file the sights off of that thing, man. The guy said, why would I file the sights off of my pistol? And his ranger said, well, because after that bear gets real irritated with you, he's going to shove that gun up your rectum, and it's going to hurt a lot less.
Exactly. Can I shoot a bear with a 380? Wow, that's naive, man. That's really naive.
Well, there's all kinds of folks that are coming, but they say, yeah, they drop you off. They get on the bus. They drop you off. It was one of the most surreal and just a real spiritual high, because I didn't see a human for 3 days at one point. Great views of McKinley. You're hiking. There's glacier-fed streams. This two scaredest times I ever was there was I was filling up my canteen at a stream, and a moose. And this was the first time I'd come real close to a moose. A big bull moose walked down there to get some water, and I'm 6 foot tall, and I was just looking at the base of his neck. They are just massive creatures. I didn't realize how huge they were in real life, and it terrified me. I just stepped behind a tree and I just stood real still for about a half hour till he had enough water and he wandered off. And I was like, man, I don't want to come anywhere near a moose. And then the other time that I was real scared, because I was by myself out there, which probably not the wisest thing, but again, you're 20 and you're like, hey, it's fine, I'll be good. I'd seen on a far side of a mountain, I'd seen a grizzly, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna head the opposite direction. So I was on the high tundra at this point, and this was in early August, and there's just berries growing wild on the tundra. I mean, you can pick all kinds of berries. Blueberries were just prolific, and gooseberries, and you could supplement whatever food packs you had with you. But I had got up to this high rise up on the high tundra there, and had this beautiful unobstructed view of Mount McKinley, which is, from what they tell me, a little bit rare because it can be often just shrouded in clouds. It kind of creates its own weather systems. It's so big. But I had my tent pitched there, and so that the opening was facing toward McKinley, so I could see it. And the
Yeah.
sun, doesn't set real early. I think it was probably about 11 p.m. that night. I was getting ready for bed. I'd been reading my Bible. I set it aside, and I had shaved my head just so that I didn't have to worry about washing my hair and stuff while I was out there hiking. And I heard this crashing through the underbrush coming up the slope, but I didn't have a window on that side of my tent. And I thought, man, whatever that is, it's pretty good size. And it kept coming on, and then at one point I could hear it breathing, and I thought, okay, this is big. My fear is this is that grizzly that I saw. And I said, so I'm gonna jump out of my tent. I've got this 12-inch buck knife. I'm in my long johns because it's a little bit cold. I'm sure I look like a crazy person. So I'm like, I'm gonna jump out of my tent. I said, I don't want to get rolled in this tent if it's a grizzly. And there's a small cliff, and it hit a glacier fed stream below me. And I said, okay, if it's a black bear or something like that, I'm gonna have a go at it. But if it's a grizzly, hypothermia be damned. I'm hitting that glacier fed stream, and I'm just going as far as it'll take me. And so I throw open my zipper, I hop out of the tent, I'm in my long johns, and I'm just flashing this knife in every direction I can think of. And there's a park ranger on this huge mount. And as soon as he saw me jump out of that tent with that knife, he threw his hand to his hip holster. So I threw my knife down, and I said, oh my goodness, man, I thought you were a grizzly bear. And he said, you're lucky I'm not. I said, I know, but you got to say, you got to give me some warning. You got to call out to the tent or something. He said, I was just he said, we saw you from the Ranger Lookout Tower. I just wanted to make sure you are all right. I said, I was 10 minutes ago. But,
until you showed up. I think I've said it before on the show before, but I'm dealing with bears. I can't remember where I heard this from, but either way, it's if it's black, fight back. If it's brown, if it's brown, lay down, and if it's white, crap yourself and hope it doesn't like the taste. So that's dealing with our three bears that we got to deal with in our continent. But man, what a wild trip though. So from Arizona to Alaska, how long did it take?
I spent 4 months hitchhiking. I just wanted to cover as much ground as I could. I'd stop it. I don't know to what degree Alaska is like that still, but in the 90s, it was a remarkable place. I mean, you could walk onto the docks and honestly, within an hour, have a job on a boat or, at one of the seafood factories. You can make enough money, keep going. Folks give you rides. It was a real rugged and individualistic, but guys would look out for. I mean, it was remarkable how people would look out for others if you were traveling alone, whether you needed a place to stay or just a little bit of work. It was a great environment. Honestly, it was. I don't know if I could replicate it today.
Yeah, I had two cousins that moved up to Washington State back in the early 2000s, late 90s, somewhere around there. One, I think in the late 90s, one in the early 2000s. They both ended up going up there, brothers. But that's what they told me. They went up to Washington State. They were over there on the West Coast, and up where the boats, up where all the boats and stuff, the fishing boats and stuff were. And I think that's what they did. I think at least I know one of them did. When he got there, that's what he did. He went and worked a fishing boat. It was like no problem grabbing a job doing that, and it was good money. It was good money for just going up and showing up and needing something to do. It would pay the bills. It would take care of you. So, I mean, if it's still like that today, I hope so. That's a wonderful thing.
They'd give you a hard time if you were green, if you were just because how it is. But and it was hard. It was hard work. I mean, it's pretty demanding. And a lot of the captains, what they would do is they'd give you a cut of the the catch. So, just a small percentage, which could sometimes be pretty lucrative depending on how much fish they brought in. But if it was if it was a bad week out, you're not making a lot of money. If it was a great week out, you're making great money. So, it just depended. But if you're willing to work hard at it, and man, no doubt, it's hard work. And the even in the middle of summer, that wind coming off of, there's still ice, big chunks of ice in the water. Where I was in Prince William Sound off of Valdez, there's still a lot of ice in the water, and it's cold coming at you.
Oh wow. So within those 4 months that you traveled from Arizona to Alaska, one thing we focus on here, one thing I focus on big time with the Rise and Kill podcast is God's creation. What was revealed to you about God's creation from Arizona to Alaska? We're talking some serious landscape changes. We're talking some serious, serious wildlife changes. We're talking serious climate changes, altitude changes. You're going to see it all. You're going to see every bit of it, from flat plains to the tallest mountains to the craziest climates, because we're talking Arizona is 110 degrees in the summer, to negative 40 for a few days straight. That's 4 months of literally seeing quite a bit of what Mother Nature can offer and spending time in it, not just passing through. Like we do, we can leave Texas today, you and I, and we can drive up to we can drive for 10 hours straight and it's a little cooler, and then we get in, it's a little cooler, and come back. Okay, yeah, you experienced the climate change, but did you really? You lived in it for days at a time of these, what did God reveal to you about his creation?
It was such a formative time in my life, in the sense that it grounded me in just the majesty and the diversity of God's creation. One of the things I came away with, I thought, what an amazing existence God must have to be able to see this vast array, not only of topography, but wildlife and, fish and animals and sunsets and sunrises from every angle all the time. And looking out at a cosmos, it made me joyful about the kind of existence that God has, and I wanted to be a part of that. So it was really formative for me in that regard. It helped me love more deeply the work that Jesus did in my life in restoring me to relationship with God, because that was the kind of this was the kind of God that I wanted to be in communication with and in relationship with for eternity. And as I saw that offered and saw this,
was that during that getting closer to Jesus, was that during the grizzly or the moose experience? Which one?
yeah, there were times that were I was glad I had that relationship.
No, but go ahead. Sorry, man.
Yeah, no, we were. I think in 90. I think it was 91 or 92. It hit like 117 in Phoenix. It was brutal hot. But we did a ton of rock climbing. The guys that I was on the gymnastics team at Arizona State, but a lot of the guys that I hung out with were big rock climbers. And so we, earlier that year, we're rappelling down these massive cliffs where there's 20-foot saguaro cactus that you're coming down by, and that desert landscape, which is, I loved it more than I thought I would. It's just it's very different, that especially that in right outside of Phoenix, you've got Devil's Canyon and all kinds of places that we would climb, but we would also head up to Flagstaff and climb as well. In Flagstaff, you've got, especially that Four Corners area, you've got the massive pine trees, but you've got nice big walls to climb. And so we loved doing that. But then going to Alaska was so different than any place I'd ever been because of the vastness and the pristine nature of it. I mean, you could, like I said, you could go for days without hardly seeing another human, but there were just vast swaths of beautiful land, mountains. I'd never seen that many trees in my life. I mean, coming from Texas and Oklahoma, there's a lot of trees, but not like that there was there. And even seeing the abundance in the summer, it made you go, oh, I could live off of this land. Now the winters are harsh and brutal, but I could see why my aunt and uncle had wanted to homestead up there, because just the abundance of the land itself was breathtaking. I mean, the berries and the fruits that would grow wild in the summer. In fact, by August, I remember hiking in August and coming over this ridge, and this massive valley that had probably in June and July just been full of berries. Most all those berries had at that point become ripe and fallen off the bushes, and they were fermenting on the ground. And it was the most interesting thing, because this whole valley had a bouquet as the breeze would blow through it, and it smelled like wine. And I just
Oh,
thought
wow.
that was amazing. I'd never smelled a valley that smelled like a good bouquet of wine if you had a nice wine. But it was just, the abundance was amazing. And then the salmon fishing, and my uncle at one point had caught like a 300-pound halibut, and halibut steaks for days out of that thing, which were amazing. And fell in love with the salmon. You could do some incredible fly fishing in some of those streams as well. So it was a place where it makes you realize that when God put Adam and Eve in the garden, and they had this land, and he says, look, be fruitful, multiply, that there would have been, I imagine it would have been kind of like that. There's just, if you're willing to work for it, there was just an abundance of life to be had. It was remarkable.
Man. You have some other interesting things. You're a gun guy. I'm not
I
a
am.
gun guy. We talked about this a little bit earlier, and what I mean by guys, I'm not a gun guy is, and I'll tell y'all, just like I told Garfield, so he's hearing this again. But when I go hog hunting, I have one rifle I grab. That's the AR back there. When I go deer hunting or something like that, I grab this 308 next to me. If I go small game hunting, there's a 22 I'm going to grab. I know what I like. That's what I stay with. I don't research a lot of guns. I don't look up guns. I don't know a lot of guns. However, Garfield knows a little bit more than me, and he's got some historical pieces and different and some
Yeah.
antique pieces anyway,
Yeah.
and things like that. And so, what got you into that? And tell us a little bit about what you got.
Yeah, so to show you my first one that I love. So my grandfather, he served in World War II. His name's also Garfield. He was a frontline machine gunner under Patton. And I've got
Oh, wow.
I wish
Okay.
it's in my other room, a really cool photo of him with his company. He was one of only two survivors of his platoon, and he went into the war not a believer. And it was a very difficult time for him. He had been shot out of a building by a German Panzer. He'd been at one point pinned down by this German machine gunner for a couple of days. And after that guy ran out of bullets, him and his buddy who he was pinned down with, they charged that building. He was able to subdue that officer, and he took his sidearm off of him, which was a Walther PP, which was what a lot of the German officers would carry. And so actually, I have that piece here. So this is my I hold it up for the camera. This is my grandfather's Walther PP. So it's still in great shape. It's still got a clean action. We fire it occasionally. It's just a beautiful
It looks
beautiful
great.
little gun. But what I love about this Walther PP is that it still has the serial numbers of the Nazi officers on it. But I love that it went into the war as a Nazi weapon, and it came home as an American soldier's sidearm that he had planned to hand down to his son and to his grandson. And so
That's so
when
cool.
he gave me that, I was like, I love this so much. And so then my dad was like, if you like this. And my mom had my great grandfather who served in World War One, but he was a park ranger at Yosemite from the early 1900s to about 1915. He was a park naturalist and a park ranger at Yosemite. In fact, he wrote a book on the redwoods of Coast and Sierra. And at the time when it was published in 1918, they bound it in redwood, which I don't think you actually. I don't know, maybe you still can, but it always struck me as something that you might not be able to get away with today. But it's a beautiful old book. But the
That's
gun
really
that
cool, though.
it was, yeah, I loved it. The gun that he carried, and he carried it in his vest pocket. And so whenever I develop these vests, it's a small sidearm, but I'm like, you know what? I'm going to have a right side pocket that can handle his little Ivor Johnson Cycle Works 1908 revolver. So this is his. It's a small piece. I don't know if you can see. It's still got the owl logo here on it, and it's a hammerless gun, but let's see, let me open it up here. So it's got a really cool, I don't know if you can see that. It's got a really cool mechanism for a revolver that they don't really make anymore. But because it's such an old gun, it's a 1908 model. You actually can't use the ACP rounds in it. They're just too intense
Yeah.
for those old guns. You have to use the old rounds, old black powder rounds. But I'll fire it occasionally just because I want to keep it clean and keep it active. And I just feel like a little sidearm like that for me, it was just a piece of history. I remember my forefathers who fought. I remember what they believed in. I remember how they loved their families. Both my grandfather and my great grandfather were lay preachers. So after my grandfather came back from World War II, he had asked my grandmother. She'd been praying for him. She prayed for him while he was away at war, and when he got back, she prayed for him. And he was sitting there one day after he got back from the war, and he had a lot of trauma from the war. But he asked her, her name was Vernie. He said, "Vernie, we still have a Bible around here?" And she was like, as fast as she could, she knew where that Bible was. She ran and she got it, and she brought it back to my grandfather. He just sat there for days just reading that thing. And she always told me that story. But he said, "Well, I guess we better go to church, that next Sunday." So they went to a little church in town, and it was Wynnewood's obviously very small, but the church one Sunday would be a Church of Christ, and then like the next Sunday, I think the Methodists or somebody met, so they had to switch. And so when he joined that church, he's like, we ended up joining Church of Christ because that was the Sunday it happened to be. So, but he from that point on, he was just a lifelong faithful believer. But I remember my dad telling me that if a war documentary movie came on, like a World War II or something, it would still cause him to just shake. It took him about 20 years after the war before he could even talk about it. And he had a ton of great stories. But anyways, having those pieces, keeping them active, firing them occasionally, it really makes me feel connected to those men in a way that I just didn't want to lose. And so I have some distinctive sidearms myself that I hope to give to my sons. I've got six kids, so I've got to build up a small arsenal just to make sure everybody gets a handgun after I pass. But I wanted those.
Go forth and
pieces
multiply, brother.
Yeah. I just wanted them to have those pieces so that when I'm gone, kind of the same thing. That precious memory lives on. It makes you feel connected to something bigger than yourself. It makes you proud of the men that came before you. It makes you love community more. So honestly, that was part of my love of having those older sidearms, learning about them, and even just kind of studying the evolution of guns. So I like your AR behind you. I've got a Bushmaster in my other room, but a buddy of mine is a huge gun fanatic, so he actually teaches me more than I know. His friend was the armorer for the John Wick movies, if you're familiar with the John Wick movies.
Oh yeah. Who's not?
So he had in his closet some of the one of the Benelli shotguns that Keanu Reeves trained on there. And that thing has an unbelievable rate of fire. Like, it's not even necessary for a shotgun to fire that many rounds that fast, but he just had them because he was a fanatic. And then he introduced me some of the Canik handguns, which I decided I like pretty well. Also, some of their 9mm stuff.
Man, I had a Benelli shotgun that I got a few years ago, and I actually got it in a trade. It was a guy who wanted an AR and had this really nice Benelli shotgun. I can't remember what model it is because you have to forgive me. It's been 12 years ago. But it was a semi-auto, great Benelli, beautiful rifle. And I came out way ahead on the trade. He wanted an AR. I told him, I said, this AR is not worth what that Benelli's worth, right? And he goes, I don't care. I just want an AR and I don't want the Benelli. I'm like, cool. So, and it's not costing me money. So I was like, that's sweet. So it was, $1,200-$1,300 Benelli.
Yeah.
And I ended up making my own stupid trade on that Benelli, mainly because I got my money's worth out of it, but and part of it, one part of that deal was this 308 and another shotgun, but it's a great part about Texas. We can trade guns like cards.
Yeah.
But anyway, but man, that Benelli was. I still kind of kick myself in the butt every once in a while for getting rid of that shotgun. One of the best pieces
Oh,
of equipment I've ever had. And,
those
I'll
those
probably have to
gunsmiths
get
are
another one day.
Yeah, those gunsmiths are amazing, man. You know, in fact, it was because of the different firearms that when we were designing the holsters on this vest, I really had to do a ton of run through. So what I wanted to be able to do is take a 1911, because I've got a lot of guys that carry 1911s, and I like the 1911 guns, and I wanted that 1911 to fit real snug and secure in the holster. So like I like hip holsters also, but I'm a real thin guy, and if I wear a hip holster, I print like a beast. So I wanted something that wasn't gonna, you know, print, but I needed the holsters here. In fact, I'm gonna back us up here just a little bit. I needed the holsters here to be able to slide in. This is actually my wife's 380, but I just had in there. It's real light, hot today, so it's trying to carry light. But I wanted a 1911 to be able to fit in there real snug, and it does perfectly. But then I needed to go from that 1911 to, I wanted to carry occasionally my grandfather's Walther PP. And Walther PP, if you're familiar with, they're just a much smaller handgun. And so I made it to where that Walther PP fits in there snug. It's perfect. I've got a video on my website of me doing a handstand with the guns in the holster to show that they stay secure and they don't fall out.
Wait, you got as much gray as I do, and you're still out here doing handstands, brother? I don't know if it's more amazing that gun held on, or you're doing handstands still with that much gray like I'd have. So
yeah, I was inspired by, I was a gymnast, but my coach, when I was in college, he was still doing standing backflips, and I said, man, that's the guy I want to be. So when I turned 53, I did 53 backflips on the day I turned 53.
Okay, that's awesome.
So my goal was to do the number of backflips every year for the age that I turned. Each year, my knees hurt a little bit more the next day, but trying to keep it up.
Dude, at my peak athletic ability, and I was a pretty good athlete back in the day, if I'd done one backflip would break something, no doubt about it. So
you're a big guy, man.
Dude, at 53. I got a question. Do you still climb or do any of that? Yes or no?
Yes. In fact, my one of my sons loves climbing, and so he's been doing some competitive gym climbing, and that got me back.
Show me your hands. Show me your hands. Let me see those hands. So one thing I've been watching, I can't think of his name. He's from a foreign country. I like watching him. He's a climber, and he'll go through and do like a lot of strength training stuff. Like he'll do like a lot of hand strength training, and he'll go talk to guys like I can't think of his name. The Canadian dude that's an arm wrestler. Of course, they've got the professional arm wrestlers. They got great hand strength and you know he'll and whatnot. But I look at the size of this guy, and he's probably built just a lot like you, and his hand strength, the strength of climbers and gymnasts, and I can't lie, pound per pound is just stinking impressive. You know, they're never the biggest guys. Funny story, I went rock climbing. When I was 18, I moved to the Palador Canyon, and I had a buddy of mine named Scott, and he was probably about your size, and he wanted to go rock climbing. Now, he wasn't an experienced rock climber, but he was an athletic dude, pretty good shape. So we take out and we're going up some decent cliffs, nothing too radical, anything like that. You know, no big, we're not going vertical or anything, but we get to it's a little sketchy, especially for a big guy. And I'm about 280 pounds back then.
Okay.
And in really good shape, strong. And we get to one part, and I'm hanging with him for the most part. I'll lose him in a few spots and then catch back up to him in a few easier spots, things like that. And I remember we get to a spot, and I look, and there's some smaller holds and a lot of loose gravel up on this cliffside that we're on, and it's, I don't know, probably it's not a super steep grade, but it's steep enough you don't want to let go. Mm-hmm. And I watch him, and this little sucker just bounces across this thing like a spider monkey. I'm like, oh gosh, what do I do? I'm like, I can't. At 18, you can't punk out, right?
So, you gotta go.
You're never gonna live it down. So I'm like, I got to go for this. I have no choice. I mean, peer pressure wins today. So, and so I go to cross and I get about halfway through this little section, and like I said, the rock is very loose, a lot of small gravel right there in that area for whatever reason, and my foot slips, and when my foot slips, I try to recover. My hand slips, and down I go, and I immediately flip on my back to start digging my heels and my palms in because I know I'm not grabbing nothing to hold on. The only thing I can do is put the brakes on.
Mhm.
So I immediately roll over, start putting the brakes on. I slide down this side of this cliff for about 40 feet, and before it hits that vertical drop, I stop about 10 feet from it.
Oh my goodness.
So I finally find something that my left heel can grab, and my left heel by the time I stop, it's dang near just jammed into my jaw. Trying to, but I
Okay.
stop.
Yeah.
And,
Heart beating like
but
crazy.
oh, my heart was beating so crazy, and I just looked over at Scott and said, "We're done. We're going back down right now. This is over."
Yeah.
He's laughing his butt off. He doesn't care I almost died. He's just laughing. And
Oh, y'all were free climbing. You didn't have rope, nothing. You're just
yeah. But
oh,
dude, it
wow.
looked like I took a lashing with whips across my back. Dude,
Oh,
it tore my back up so bad.
yeah.
But yeah, so kudos to guys who do that. Guys, y'all have balls of steel. There ain't no doubt about it. And, it's
Well,
amazing.
280 pounds is a lot of weight to pull vertical. I mean, it's,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
So, and but nevertheless, if I did that today, I would just say, "Lord, I'm coming home." I wouldn't even try to stop. So, but but yeah, so, but man, real quick, I want to touch on something. Just a quick question. You said that you went and you got a degree. You got your degree in theology and things like that,
Mhm.
and your pastorate. Reformed Baptist, Presbyterian. What are you?
Yeah.
Where did you go?
I'm an elder in a conservative Presbyterian church here in San Antonio. When I went into the ministry, after I left uh, um, doing research, uh, and it was a Baptist church because there was a pastor there who I just loved. We were best friends. It was like a mentor to me. He was teaching me so much. And he was the first one to ask me, "Hey, have you ever felt like you should go into the ministry?" And I said, "No." But then we got to talking more, and then I said, "Man, I'd be open to it." So I went to Southwest Baptist Theological Seminary. So I was ordained as a Southern Baptist, and that was where the bulk of my pastorate took place. But then, as my wife and I, she was pregnant with our first child, we realized that we wanted to have that child baptized. In fact, one of my last papers that I wrote for seminary at Southwest Baptist Theological Seminary, they had me write a paper on baptism, and I was researching it, and I had a lot of friends who were Reformed, and some were, Paedo Baptist, and I began researching it, and I really came to the conviction that I was I wanted to baptize my children, that I was
Hmm.
wanted to do covenant baptism. I felt like it was a biblical position, but I loved all of the guys I was ministering with in the Baptist church. I didn't want to fight. Honestly, I really it wasn't my
Yeah.
intention to fight with people. So I just resigned that position, and we went and helped plant a church that was a great, thriving church for a long time. And I pastored there with another man for I think probably about 10 years.
Okay.
And so, but then from there, I've done some unconventional pastoral endeavors with folks who were unchurched and homeschool community and things like that. And then, but as my business just got to be so much to run, I couldn't
Yeah.
handle that load anymore. So we moved
Mhm.
over to a Presbyterian church. I serve as an elder there. I preached 2 Sundays ago, I think. I don't preach very often anymore. I enjoy it when I do, but most of my ministry takes place either to my family or to men on my job sites.
Okay. All right. Awesome. So I'm a Reformed Baptist, and
Mhm.
so we our statements of faith are very, very, very similar.
Oh yeah.
Um, yeah. We kept baptism correct. You didn't. That's okay. And
Hey,
but
I
but
love my Baptist brethren.
oh, I love my Presbyterian brothers. Hence to why I met you at a Presbyterian man's conference. So, but man, do me a favor then. I can trust you with this. I do believe that we close out every episode with the gospel. So give us just a quick couple-minute gospel, and tell people exactly why they need Christ.
Yeah. I'll tell you what I preached on last Sunday, which was Psalm 22 and Psalm 23. And Jesus's words on the cross were, my God, why have you forsaken me?" But what he's doing there is, he doesn't say that before the sky goes dark. He says that when the light comes back into the world. And what he's doing is he's referencing Psalm 22, where David's saying, they've pierced my hands and my feet. They've taken my garments and they're casting lots for them. And Jesus had on a seamless garment when they took that off. But all of the people there who were watching that, they would have known who else had a seamless garment, and it would have been the high priest. The high priest always wore a seamless garment at Passover. And here's these guys casting lots for it, and they've got a sign over his head that says King of the Jews. And so I imagine this scenario of the chief priests, son coming back into the world, and they hear Jesus say, my God, why have you forsaken me?" And they're probably thinking, he's singing Psalm 22. We are part of that psalm. They were saying, if God delights in him, let him rescue him, is what the gospel writers say. That's what the chief priest said. And they're caught up in Psalm 22, and they didn't even realize they're caught up in Psalm 22. And the Roman soldiers casting lots for his clothes are caught up in Psalm 22, and they don't even realize it. And so here's Jesus, with the sign above his head, King of the Jews. He's wearing a seamless garment like a high priest, and he's being sacrificed like the Lamb of God right before Passover. And if you keep singing in those Psalms, of course, you get to Psalm 23, the Lord is my shepherd. But in Psalm 30, David is singing that God will bring me up from the dead. And if you keep singing on to Psalm 31, you get to David saying, into your hands I commit my spirit, which were the last words of Jesus on the cross. And this area of the Psalms sung through tells a beautiful story, so amazingly prophetic, of the crucifixion and the resurrection and the last words of Jesus. And Jesus, as he tells his followers, look, I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for sheep. For sheep, nobody takes my life from me. I lay down my life, and I have the authority to take it up again. And when Jesus is on that cross, most people, after what the historical records tell us, 45 minutes to an hour on the cross, you can barely breathe, barely speak. Right. But Jesus, after 6 hours on the cross, the gospel writers report, he says with a loud voice, right, into your hands I commit my spirit. And the Roman centurion says, truly, this was the Son of God. This all is playing in. And then you flow right from Psalm 22 into 23, the Lord is my shepherd. And I think that Psalm 23 comes alive with depth. If you sing it from Psalm 22 into Psalm 23, you realize that this good shepherd not only leads you through the valley of the shadow of death because he went into death himself, but he restores our soul in a way that David, who wrote that psalm, could never, I think, have realized the depth of the restoration of the soul, the restoration of the relationship with the Lord. And so that first half of 23, where God is our shepherd, flows into the second half of 23, where God is this host, and he is inviting us into his home. He is anointing our head with oil, which was the ancient practice of refreshing a guest, making sure that they felt welcome, they felt honored, they were receiving an abundance as his cup is overflowing. And David goes on to say, that I'll dwell in the house of the Lord forever. And then immediately into Psalm 24, he says, and the earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof. And for me, the gospel is an invitation into this glorious world that God has made, restored in relationship with him in a way that I can walk through the world knowing that God is walking with me as a good shepherd who has paid for my sins, who has brought me to him, has restored me into relationship with him, and gives me confidence and the ability to see the beautiful things that he is doing and to feel like I can work with him in this world to advance the kingdom.
Amen. Amen. There is no hope without Christ. There's no doubt about it. There is no joy without Christ.
Yeah.
And to know Christ and to know his creation, which so many of our brothers know Christ and haven't took time to learn his creation. It's a true blessing to know both, because God reveals himself through his creation. And when you combine that with scripture and you combine that with your salvation and you put those three things together, you understand a little bit more about who our creator is. Because he is intertwined through everything. There's no doubt about it. man, I want to thank you for being on here.
Yeah, this
Guys,
was really enjoyable.
make sure to go. The website is what again?
Evergreen-gear.com.
Evergreen-gear.com. Go on there and pick you up a vest. No doubt about it. And guys, also, you need a shirt for underneath that vest. So make sure to go riseandkill.com. You need a hat to go with that vest. So go to riseandkill.com for that as well.
That's right. That shirt's going to look amazing with the vest.
I think so. I absolutely think so. I would show you, but you don't have one. You couldn't send me one. Like I said, you didn't have Nephilim size, so I don't have one that fits yet. So, but man, God bless you, brother. Thank you for being here today, taking the time to do this. And guys, never forget, if your heart is full of Christ, your freezer's full of meat. Your home will always be filled with joy. This is Rise and Kill Outdoors. Now, guys, go rise, kill, and eat.
Rise and kill outdoors. Rise.